Okay, today we're going to prepare some a dish from my country, Uzbekistan. In front of me is a little sample of just some of the ingredients and the food that from where I'm from, Uzbekistan. Again, it's a Central Asia. It's got a little mix of everything. It's a former Soviet Union country, so a lot of the dishes might reflect. They look a little bit of from Russia. You got a little bit of Asian dishes like rice over here, very predominant. In Uzbekistan, it's a little bit different than back home. From what my father tells me, it's just a little bit longer, and it's a little bit got almost a red tint and absorbs a lot of water. But for our use, for today and what we use here in America, is it's good, and you can buy usually at the Asian markets. Another little, lamb is another big ingredient in my country. It's mutton a lot of times, but here we just have a young lamb. We just have a little rack and a little bit of a leg of lamb here. And then a salad that pretty much we eat all throughout the summer. A lot of the ingredients that we eat, if it's not available in the wintertime, we don't eat. We eat everything in season. Everything is grown to the best of the ability of the gardener or whoever grows it. Everybody in my country always has a garden. I grew up with the same methods. My grandmother taught me the same way. So this is how I created. And then here is again a kebab. So we got some lamb kebabs with those Uzbeki rice pilaf, with a little bit of a lamb fat and lamb meat and garbanzo beans. Again, very popular back home. Obviously kebabs are very popular throughout the world. I would like to say that maybe we're creative, because it's very predominant and it's real. Okay, it's a lot of love. The main spices, there's quite a few. The main ones is coriander and cumin. That's one of my favorites, is cumin. I love to use cumin. This is actually that was given to me by my family from Jerusalem. So this is very pungent and very flavorful. So we're going to start right now with one of the dishes that I'm going to be preparing for the Crane House dinner on the February 20th, and it's going to be pilmeni. Now this dish is very popular in Russia, and again, as I said, it's a Soviet Union, country. We became independent in '91, so a lot of the ingredients and the food, came down, but we changed a little bit different. And what we do is, again, we're going to start with a little bit of grounded beef and lamb. A lot of times people don't like lamb because it's very pungent. So I like to add a little bit of beef to it, so it kind of takes down a notch. And then I added some cumin to it, some onions, and I use white onions. White onions is, in my country, is very a popular item because it's a little bit milder and sweeter, and it just tastes a little bit better. There's the red, and the yellow, and they're all used for different purposes. In this case, again, I'm going to use white onion because it's a little bit milder. We're going to start first by making the dough for the pilmeni. It's just pretty much, it's very similar, I guess, to Italy. It's pasta dough, but it's made a little bit different. We're just going to start, it's not as much eggs. So we're just going to start with a little bit of flour, about a couple cups, and then we're going to add an egg into that, and a little bit of water. Again, if you're making pasta dough, you're pretty much going to make, it's going to be a lot more egg yolks. This is, a little bit different and, very simple. In my country, if you grow up, you can't use too many eggs. Again, this is something, you only use a little bit to what you need because eggs are more expensive, and you want to keep it to eat or do some other things. So you add the egg to bind the dough together, and then you just mix it. And if you need a little bit more water, you just add it. And a lot of the countries, like my country, there's no recipes. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Everything is by touch. Everything is by feel. When you get the right consistency, that's when the dish is made. So we're just gonna mix this up a little bit. And once the consistency is right, I'm gonna put this on my cutting board and knead it a little bit. And when you're making dough, it's always good. You need to knead it so you stretch out the gluten that's in the flour, and that's what's going to give you the great dough. And we're just going to knead it, and it should be a little sticky, not too sticky. Okay, and then once you mix it up, then you have this dough. And anytime you make a dough, you always got to let it rest. And then you see it's nice and smooth. You got a good consistency. And after you do this, you roll it out. Back home, again, you just use a rolling pin, and then just roll out, and you do a little bit of circles like this as such. Nice little circles, and it depends. However big you want it, you make it small, you make it big. it's up to your preference, whatever you'd like. So once we have, I've made a few already over here. They're just nice little circles. You want them pretty thin. You don't want it too thick because, again, you don't want to taste too much dough, but you don't want it too thin so that it breaks when it cooks. Okay, and then we're going to take some of our the meat that we have, the spiced meat and beef and the lamb combination. We just put a little bit on there. And again, this is something I used to prepare with my grandmother. You know, it's a kind of a tedious. You know, you got to make probably hundreds of these to feed a family of 8 or 10 because they go quick. So it's something you sit down and you create and you make and you roll. So it's something I do with my grandmother. You know, she would make the dough for me, and then I would create. You know, I would sit, watch TV or do something and create the dish. And I'm just going to use just a little bit of water here. You can use egg wash if you'd like. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it into a half moon. Okay, and then once it's in a half moon, I'm going to put another little bit more on the tip, and then bringing the ends in together, and you make the shape, the pelmeni. Very simple dish, nothing to it. In the meat, actually, there's also rice. I forgot to add that. There's rice in the mix, and it's not cooked, it's raw, and that's why, you know, we're going to cook it in a broth. Okay, so once we have the meat, I'm going to do a couple of these, and once you roll it, everything else after that is pretty simple. And after you roll these, you just put a little bit of flour, and then we have the product right here. And again, you want a little bit of flour so they don't stick. You know, if you can do it a day ahead, you're going to have to do a little bit more flour, because the flour is going to be absorbed into the flour. So once we have this, the next step is to make the broth. And that's going to be the next step, which I'm going to prepare over here. Some of the ingredients we're going to be preparing with the broth. It's very simple. We're going to use a little bit of the lamb meat. Some of the, you know, when I trim the lamb, when I ground it up, I have saved a little bit of the meat. You know, back home, my mother would do the same. My grandmother would do the same. They would save a little bit of the meat, and that's what you're going to add to your broth. And then we just have some white onions and some carrots. Get your oil hot. You can also use some of the fat. You know, a lot of times back home, when you make kebabs, also you ground some of the fat into it. That's going to give you a lot of flavor. Fat, again, is good flavor, but you don't want to overdo it, because then it's going to rise to the top and it's going to cover your mouth, and then you won't be able to taste the food. But it's got to be rich. So we, you know, in Uzbekistan, a lot of the foods are very, very rich, because a lot of the people there are nomadic people. You know, they want to eat something hearty, and they go to work, so they got to be real, real rich and hearty. Okay, so we have a pan here. We're going to wait till it gets hot, and we're going to have the meat. And to that, we're going to have some garlic. And then whenever you cook, you know, it's something, you know, as a chef that we do at the restaurants, you want to let it cook. You never want to touch, you know, don't mess around with it, don't keep stirring it. Just let it sear, let it do its thing, let it get some flavor and color. So I'm just going to take a few of these garlic cloves, and I'm just going to mince it up for a broth. Again, the difference between a broth and a stock is you have meat. If you had a whole lamb leg, you can use that bone and you know, put it in with your broth, and it'll create a lot of good flavor. Okay, you can hear the sizzling. That's what you want. You want to hear that sizzling. Once the meat is brown, we're going to add our aromatics, which is the onions and the carrots. And again, you want to stir it just a little bit so it gets some flavor to it, so everything is combined, everything is working together in a medley. Okay, anytime you're cooking, It's something my grandmother always said, and your parents always tell you, or you're a chef, is you never want to overdo everything. You do a little bit of everything so it combines to make a symphony. You don't want to have too much pepper or too much, lamb or too much of this and that, because it's going to overpower. Then you're not going to taste the dish, you're going to taste the ingredient that you put to mine. So always add a little bit, and if it needs more, then you add some more. Into this mix while we're cooking, we're going to add a little bit of salt and pepper to that. A little salt and pepper, just a touch, just to get the flavor. You always want to season every step you do when you're creating, once you put the more vegetable, you season it up so everything's coming with flavor. Then at the end, once you taste it, if it's perfect, then you don't need nothing else. Okay, so our vegetables again are real nice and got a lot of color. We're going to add a little bit of garlic to that. And you don't want to cook garlic too much because it's going to be bitter and it's going to off-taste your flavor of your sauce. And then to this, we're going to add water. Again, a lot of places are kind of, they say water. In our profession, we use stock or we use more broth. In my country, we use water, because we're going to use meat, we're going to use bones. There's going to be a lot of flavor into it, so you don't need to, where I'm from, I try to, if I'm in the kitchen, I will use broth if I have, or I will use stock. But for where I'm from, they just use water and let the natural flavors give off, and that's how you create the flavor and let it taste. Okay? And then to that, we're going to add a little bit of tomato paste, and the tomato paste is going to help it with the richness of the lamb. Is going to help it cut down a little bit and give you a little bit more flavor. Let it simmer and broth. Usually when my mother prepares it, again, it's going to let it sit 20-30 minutes. It's just going to, the sauce, the broth is going to cook. So you get that full flavor. It reduces, just like a sauce or a stock that we're creating, is you want to let it reduce. So the water evaporates and the natural flavors condense, and you get a really great dish. Again, I'm going to add cumin, one of my favorite ingredients. Very pungent, very pungent. And whenever we create, my dad does it, he'll squeeze it a little bit, just, these are the whole seeds. So when he does the seeds, you crunch them with your fingers so it releases some of the aroma, the flavor. I love cumin. Anything, with lamb, to me, lamb, it goes really, really great. And obviously coriander. Coriander is not going to be used in this, but if you're making a kebab, coriander and cumin go really, really great. You can do chicken, you can do beef, you can do lamb. Whatever protein you like to use, they'll go really great with it. And you can see the broth has been cooking a little bit. We got a nice color in there. We got some good flavors going on. And so the ingredients are still raw. So you want to let them cook, let them simmer, let them take their time. Again, it's just like we're going to hamburger, any item like that. Let it cook, let it simmer, let it get the full flavor out of it. Okay? And then we got our pelmeni ready to go over here. And this is something you can take, you can make and freeze them. We can do, my mom. Again, we're going to make a lot of these, and, this I could probably eat myself, but you make for the whole family, you're going to need a lot more, so you can take them, freeze them, and then when you're ready, you can put it in your pot and just make the sauce and cook them. Or you can steam it. In Russia, it's a very popular dish. Again, they usually just boil it in a little bit of water and eat it with sour cream. Again, just like any dish, we always say that we create dishes, but a lot of the dishes we don't create, we just recreate. We just take from one country, we take to another, and then we add our own flavor to it, and it becomes a different dish, another different flavor, and that's how we make it our own. Because we, at a certain point, where there's so many dishes available, you don't do it. So this is our take, Uzbekistan steak on wood, on the pelmeni. Very, very popular dish, very popular in Siberia a lot of times, but very, very popular. Something you eat when you're sick, so when I'll be sick in the wintertime, my mother will pull some out, make a little bit of the broth, and I would eat that, and you feel good because it's rich and it's got a lot of good flavor. It's got onions. Onions is another great, great ingredient, and I love to use onions. A lot of the ingredients, you can see some of the dishes that I created here, onions are everywhere. Onions and garlic are some of the ingredients that, really keep you healthy. You can eat onions, you can eat onions in a salad, you use it as a top. This is raw onions, not cooked. You can eat them cooked, but when you eat it raw, the ingredients, the nutrients are still there. So you don't lose any. When you cook, they lose. They evaporate with the water, when they cook. So again, we try to keep it, I love onions, again. So I use raw onions. We make a tomato cucumber, salad. It's just a basic salad with tomato, onions, and some scallions. The in the dish right here, the kebabs. It's a little bit of vinegar with the onions and cilantro just right on top. It just adds a little bit more depth, a little bit more flavor to it, and I think onions are the greatest thing. And it keeps you healthy. You can be healthy really a lot. Okay, so once I've added the greens, I'm gonna add the garbanzo beans. Again, another one of my favorite ingredients. And on the market in Uzbekistan, you can walk around. They'll have these steamed with a little bit of the salad, and you put it in a little cone, and you eat this. This is just a typical street vendor food. But for me, I like the way they look. The taste is great. And a lot of the dishes we're using a little bit of this rice pilaf that my grandmother prepared for me all the time. It's just a simple ingredient, just adds another taste of flavor to it. So we're gonna add a little bit of this to our broth. And again, just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and that's how we create these different layers of flavor. The broth is gonna cook, and it gets the flavor. Another one of my favorite dishes is this. Very popular in the summertime, grape leaves. Very, very good. This again, the same meat that I've used, just added some rice to it, and then they just roll these in the grape leaves. Usually it'll be fresh. Here, I had to use some in the jar, but if you use in the jar, you always have to boil them out because usually they're in a brine or they're a little bit tough, so you have to cook them a little bit in the water just to release some of that water, the salt, and get them a little bit more tender. And then these have been braised for about an hour. I've cooked them. A low heat, take its time. Again, most of the foods, from the back or the old world, is you gotta let it cook. You gotta let it take its time. You can't rush. They say you can't rush perfection. You can't rush good food. Everything's gotta take its time. It's gotta have flavor. It's gotta build it. So you take its time. When we're in the kitchen, if something needs to be cooked, we let it cook. We cook asabuca at the restaurant. It's gotta take its time. You can't make it happen in 10 minutes. Because it's not going to taste right, and it's not going to come out right, and it'll be very tough. So again, same thing with this. We use the same concept with the broth. We just use this, and except we did this, we added the pilmeni. So a lot of the dishes may be similar because again, you have to try different things. Most of the countries, again, they're not fortunate enough to have a fillet or some of the higher end dishes. So you have to make it work, just change it a little bit, and then you create these dishes. Okay. And our broth has been simmering. I'm going to season a little bit more. Add a little bit of crushed red to that, just give it a little spice. Another tip to have is you don't want to season too much because once the sauce is going to reduce, the broth is going to cook, the flavor is going to cook. So if you put too much salt, it's going to reduce, it's going to be very salty. So again, I'll let it simmer down a little bit, then I'll just add a little bit more salt just so it gets flavor. And then once the broth tastes good, oh my God. Once the broth tastes good, you like it the way you want it, now we start adding the pilmeni. Okay, very simple dishes again. Just some basic pasta dough filled with meat. You can do with the other ingredients if you like. You can do potatoes, whatever you like. Now we're going to add it straight in. We're not going to boil it like they do in Italian cuisine. Boil it first. And this is actually good because some of the flour that's stuck on the actual pasta is going to help to thicken the sauce. So when you actually have the final product, it's going to be a nice, rich broth. Not just like a soupy, watery down sauce. Okay? And again, this is going to have to be turned down to heat. And you cook it slow, low and slow, so you let all the onions, if the rice, if you decide to put it. So it's got to all cook. So you let it take its time. And once it's ready, we just put it in a bowl, and then we garnish it with a little bit of cilantro. Again, the cilantro is one of my favorite ingredient for soups or anything like that. It adds a little bit of flavor. It adds a little bit of freshness to it. And, very simple dish, nothing too crazy. And this is what my cuisine is about. In most of the cuisines, they're very simple. There's not thousands of ingredients, and that's how cooking should be. Simple ingredients, create it, and then make flavorful flavor with a lot of flavors.